See that though, by the way.
What?
CPM.
Oh, it's super easy. So you just go to revenue. It's the revenue tab.
Yeah, no, mine's at 6:15.
Huh, anyway, we're live. Jordan and I are talking some shop here. So we're going to let everyone jump in here for a little bit. This is the Book of Acts, Session 3. If you have not seen Session 1 and Session 2, certainly you can watch this one without that. We're going to go back and go over what we went over on Session 1 and Session 2. But if you haven't seen it, make sure you do it. It's been going really, really well. We've been getting about 10 to 12 people, which, I mean, when we started this, we were like, hey, if nobody shows up, we're having a 3-person devotion. So it was like there's no lose on this because, I mean, we've done small devotions in the past. And so if we can get 10 people showing up and it's a 13-person group, as far as small groups, that's pretty big.
It is right? Good, yeah. That's a full group, boy.
Yeah, it's a full group. So perfectly happy with that number. We would love to grow it. So if you guys are watching this or you watch it and you've got friends that are either followers of Jesus Christ or curious about it at all, share it with them. Tell them what's going on. Have them watch it. Have them subscribe. And when I say subscribe, it's not to benefit us at all. We are trying to use Freelance Duck Hunting, which is at over 20,000 subscribers now. And we would like to be able to share the teachings of Jesus Christ with as many people as possible and not only impact everyone else's lives, but this impacts our lives as well. So please share it however you can, word of mouth, Facebook, however you can share this. Let's get it out and get it going. Would love to see this channel grow so that we can just impact however God is leading us to do so. And there's also 4 videos in the description that are fantastic, that are brief summaries of the Book of Acts. So make sure to check those out as well. Jordan and Dad, you guys have any thoughts or anything going on in your mind about? We are going to go over one thing that God did for us this week, and I know what mine's going to be. It involves a little black dog. But any thoughts you guys have about anything? No one's got any thoughts. Just me. I'm the only one with any thoughts here.
I'm blank. Oh, what kind of thoughts are we talking about?
Well, I don't know. Just reflecting on the study, what's going on with FDH and Faith, the Book of Acts, and anything related to that, I guess.
Well, I mean, I love the Book of Acts, and it's history. I like history. I didn't major in history, but I like history. And this is the history of how God brought about the Jewish people to understand, a group of Jews, to understand that the gospel is to be offered to all men. And so it's just a wonderful story of how God orchestrated that. These events are not just something that just happened. I mean, it was all orchestrated by God to offer the gospel to the whole world. And so this is the story of how God did that. And really, I mean, the first century, boy, there was a lot going on.
Jordan, for some reason, it says one waiting on the actual video of it. I don't know why.
Maybe you should refresh.
Okay, let me just try to refresh. How many are you showing that are in the room?
There's 8 watching now.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, good. I didn't know if I had something wrong or not on that. I forgot to send myself the map, so I've got to do that again. So let's go. Last week we had talked about that we were going to share something from our previous week where either it can really be anything. It can be where you felt God, where you saw God, something that was just anything up through the week where maybe God was there for you, or you thought about it, or I don't know, anything in that department. And so, you got anything? What do you have? This is your chance to be thinking, Jordan. We're coming to you.
I could tell a story of what happened to me this week. I hesitate because it gets into doctrine and a lot of disagreements amongst Christians. So I don't know if I want to share that or not.
Well,
What do you think?
I think you're okay, and I will add in. Let me preface it. I think I know which story you're going to talk about. Let me preface it with, we are not extremely charismatic individuals and never really have been. A charismatic are going to. So you've got intellectual Christianity, and you've got some churches on one end of the spectrum that hone in on the intellectual side of Christianity. If you're familiar with Hugh Ross and Reasons to Believe, that would be a perfect example of a group of people or Christians or a church that are just completely centered and honed in on the intellectual side of Christianity. Yeah. They want to research every single aspect of history, why I believe what I believe, why it makes sense, see if we can make some connections to it, to the science of today. That type of Christianity. Those people are typically old earth believers. They believe modern day science. They believe the earth is, what is it, like 3.5 billion years old, or is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, they believe the universe is 13 to 14 billion.
Yeah, and the earth is, anyway,
Earth is about 3.5.
And then on the full opposite end of the spectrum, you have Christians who are honed in on the spiritual side of it. These are people that typically believe in speaking in tongues. They believe in modern day prophecy. They believe in lots of healings. They're just completely honed in on the spiritual side. And then you've got everything in between that range.
Yeah. More experience oriented. Mm-hmm. But we all, no matter what our persuasion is, we all believe in experiencing God.
For sure.
But it's a little more emphasized.
So like someone who's clear on the charismatic side, they probably normally can't give you the reasons that they believe what they believe. It's a more of an emotional, normally I'm talking in like averages. No, that's not part of what they worry about.
I guess that's right.
And then on the far intellectual side, they're probably not talking about healings. They probably don't talk in tongues. Probably not. We're talking general averages. Now, all of these people
There's a lot of variability in each group.
Yeah. Now, on the core essential doctrine, these churches tend to believe the same thing. The literal birth of Jesus, that Mary was a virgin, literal resurrection. And so the essential doctrine these people agree in, but it's just kind of how the practice
requirements for accepting God and receiving eternal life is pretty much the same.
There are some overlays, like sometimes you'll get people to say you don't go to heaven if you don't get baptized. So you do have some branches that kind of
there's a lot of variability.
And so with us, typically, especially you and I, our mom, your wife, it tends to be a little more on the spiritual side than us, I would say. Yeah. And you and I we process information mostly the same way. So throughout your life, and I'd say definitely throughout mine, we're tilted on the intellectual side of things. Yeah. Not necessarily because we look down on anything. It's just like, I need reasons to believe this. Yeah. I need to understand it. I need to research it. It needs to intellectually make sense to me, or I can't be in. I can't be in it. Right. Okay, so prefacing that, I think that you can tell your story, and it makes a lot more sense.
All right. So I have two children. You know one.
I know both of them. Oh, they're down to me.
So the audience knows who the one is. And I have a daughter. And she's older than Elliot. Very special girl. But she recently got involved with the more charismatic side, and has had a real spiritual experience and renewal in her life. And it's been really fantastic. Although, since I'm not highly charismatic, I've had my doubts. And so,
people like us tend to do that. If the charismatic side, they say, here's a prophecy or whatever. We're kind of like, you know, how can I intellectualize that?
Yeah,
which is a fault of ours, honestly.
To a point, it is. can always.
It's definitely a fault of mine.
Yeah.
For sure it is.
Well, then it's probably mine too. So
Well, we're so indoctrinated by naturalism,
Yeah.
that it bleeds its way into our thought process, whether we like it or not.
yeah, it does. And so we have this Sunday school class, apologetics Sunday school class at my church, and I've been going to that and looking forward to going to it. And Sunday, I thought, it's Saturday night, I thought, man, I'm tired. I'm just going to sleep in until I want to get up. And while I slept longer than I thought, and by the time I had gotten ready for church, it was too late. And in the meantime, I received a call from her daughter saying, hey, this great speaker is coming to our church. Would you come to church with us? And my response was, I want to go to my Sunday school class. Well, bottom line was that I missed my Sunday school class. So I said, okay, all right, we'll come. And so they had this speaker. He was a fantastic speaker. There was some charismatic stuff that he talked about that kind of blew my mind.
Like
But-
in a very skeptical, like, come on, or do you still say I don't believe it, or how? Because you mentioned that before, but I didn't.
Yeah, well,
Like, you don't buy it, or you're just being skeptical.
he was talking about people being raised from the dead. And I'm not saying that never happens. Certainly happened with Jesus and Lazarus. But I just don't think that's something that happens much.
Let me stop you there, because I would be very skeptical about that as well. But Craig Keener put out a book, 200 Medical Miracles, and in that book there are medically documented resurrections in Africa. Now, I'm just saying that from what I've heard. I'm not
Yeah.
saying, yeah, that's true and I believe it.
Yeah,
I'm saying this is a very trustworthy book where they really try to hunt the sources
Well,
down.
yeah.
I'm just adding that in there for what it's
I
worth.
saw a video of a guy being raised from the dead in Africa, and it didn't convince me.
Yeah.
It looked all staged to me, and
I'm just
far-
throwing that
far
out
be
there
it from
for
me to not recognize when God is doing something, but that's just the way it looked to me.
Sure.
So anyway, I went, and some of the stuff he said kind of freaked me out, but there was a whole bunch of good stuff that he said. And so after, I won't go into the whole service, there was some really good stuff that went on. Like he asked people to come forward that were depressed. Wow, it was a crowd.
And both you and Mom agreed that this guy just had the eyes of someone who loves Jesus. and
He
caring.
did. He had
Which
very,
tells a lot.
very caring eyes.
Yeah.
And so he said, I'm going to be out in the foyer after church. And if anybody wants to stop by to be prayed for healing, or wants to share an experience of God working in their life, then I'll be there for that. And so my daughter said, is it okay, Dad, if we stop and talk to him? There's a prayer request that I would like to make. And well, it's really, this request was near and dear to my daughter's heart. And I'm going to say no, right? I'm going to say no. I'm ready to go eat.
No one's praying. I'm going to eat.
Yeah. I'm not going to wait around for any praying.
That's a big case of guilt for the rest of the day.
Yeah. So I'm going to say that. Well, no. So I didn't say that. I said, okay. So we went on and we got in this long line to talk to him. And as we got near, she said, looks at me kind of with soft eyes and said, Dad, is it okay if instead of praying for this other thing, that we could have him pray for your hearing? And I thought, oh, gee, I'm 75 years old. I mean, don't waste your prayers on an old guy.
And you have hearing aids.
And I
Right.
have hearing aids. And so why do we want to do that? But she really wanted to do that. And so I said, oh, okay, hon. I was thinking to myself, I'm not sure if I want this guy laying hands on me. And, but when I got close enough to
And laying hands would just be praying and
yeah, like so,
praying and touching.
or this and praying. And so I got up close to him, and he looked me in the eyes, and he had very caring eyes. And he put his hands against my head, and he prays for me that my hearing will be restored. And then he asked me, "Can you hear better?" Well, I'm thinking, okay, now how am I going to know? And I thought, well, I should get an increase in volume. There should be boom, should be just like turning on the switch. And so when he asked me if that helped, I said no. And so he prayed again, and and then he says, "How's that working?" Well, let me just say this: the first time he prayed for me, I thought he reached over and blew in my ear because I felt a puff of air in my ear. And the second time he prayed for me again, I had my eyes closed. I should have had them open, and I said no. And the third time he prays and he asked me, and I said no. And he says, "Okay, well, sometimes, uh, sometimes it's harder to heal, and prayer and fasting might help." And I said, "Okay, thanks." And I said, "I really appreciate you praying for me." And we left. So,
Just for the record, if some guy was praying for me and I thought it was blowing in my ear, my eyes would come open.
well, I wish mine.
It'd be more like,
I wish mine.
"You doing?"
I wish mine had.
I wouldn't just keep my eyes closed.
I grab him by the ear. Get away from my ear.
You can pray for me, but you're not gonna blow into my
They
ear.
are blowing in my ear. Don't be sticking your finger in my ear either. If he'd have bent down and brought us some mud and spit on it and stuck it in my ear, I'd have really been freaked out. Jesus did some healing that way. And so then we went to this restaurant where it was real noisy. And one thing about it is when I go out with the family to eat in a noisy restaurant, I just sort of sit off the side and just sort of vegetate because I can't hear what's being said. Well, so we're sitting there and I'm not thinking much about it. And finally, my wife, Erlene, says, "Carl, you're understanding what we're saying, aren't you?"
Because she's always griping about it. I can't hear.
Yeah. Oh, she's on me all the time. It's like before I got the hearing aids, it was. She said, "You can't hear anything," and I'd say, "No, you're mumbling." And of course, she has a tendency to try to talk to me from 4 blocks away,
Yeah.
anyhow. So, yeah. As a matter of fact, I can hear what you guys are saying. Maybe the restaurant's just quieter than normal.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was kind of getting on my case for not believing that I was healed. And I said, "Well, just give me a little time."
We're
with this.
skeptical.
Give me-
We're not just going to be like, "I'm healed." That's not
Yeah.
going to take place. We're going to have to make sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, give me a little time to think about this. And so then I thought, bad hearing, I shouldn't have expected a blast of volume because that's not the problem with hearing. Everything is still the same volume. It's just you can't understand it.
Yeah, you can't understand that.
It's just garbled, and you can turn up the volume, and that doesn't mean you're going to understand it, particularly with mumblers. And so I went home and I got to thinking about that. And the next morning, I got up, was doing my regular chores, and I'm understanding what she's saying. I'm thinking, everything, when you're using hearing aids, it's like it turns up the crispness of everything. In fact, it's so crisp, it's ragged. I don't know how to explain it.
It's almost sharp. It hurts.
It hurts, yeah. And if you have a grainy voice, whoa, man, I can't hardly stand to listen to
Do
it.
I have a grainy voice?
No. But the lady that sold me the hearing aids does. Man, oh man. And so when you take them out, you can still hear if people are enunciating properly. And only it's not grating. It's really smooth. The sound is really smooth. And I realized, the sound is really smooth, but it's like I'm actually understanding things better. And so I had to finally admit to my wife that I thought that God had healed my
Have you put in your hearing aid since?
No.
Have you felt like you needed to put them in since?
No, I don't want them.
So
There's one big test is when you watch movies on TV.
Have you done that yet?
Well, I did that test, and I still had a little trouble hearing, but normally with my bad hearing, it's like if I don't have earphones on, I'm lost.
Yeah.
I'm lip reading and everything. I mean, they mumble on those things, just something. Now the sports or news or something I hear fine because they're taught to enunciate.
Yeah.
But movies, no. Well, so there was an improvement. So I said, well, wow, thank God. It's not that I disbelieve in healing. I do believe in healing. I just have a tendency not to think it's going to be happening all the time.
Yeah.
And so, boy, was that a long story.
No, that's good. Though.
But that's what happened to me. Now, he prayed for my Parkinson's disease also. And it seems like there's some improvement. It really is.
If you no longer have Parkinson's, I'm taking Izzy there for her limb.
Yeah.
Izzy, you're going to be healed.
Yeah. Yeah, she popped her head up.
I'm only halfway joking about that.
Yeah. Well, and so I don't know what to say about Parkinson's. I'm analyzing it.
But the point is, you've got two people here who are on the far side of the intellectual side of Christianity, and you're to the point now where you're willing to say, are you willing to say I was healed or I think I was healed? Which there's a big difference between the two. Still need a little more time. You're still in the I think phase.
Here's the acid test. If I can go around being myself, talking and listening and everything, and I'm in on a lot of what's going on, and my wife Erlene, if I'm not having to say huh,
yeah,
and then she's saying, don't be saying that all the time.
Like, well, I can't hear it, George. Yeah, we do.
If that interaction between us is gone, then I'm healed.
Yeah.
And so far, I don't know if she's faking it or what. But anyway, thank the Lord. Praise the Lord. It's kind of funny because my daughter sneaked me in there and tricked me.
Yeah.
I claim that she lied to me. Whatever. I guess if that you have to lie to somebody to get them healed, I guess that's worth it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's just a little white lie.
Yeah.
I don't believe. Well, maybe I do.
I don't know. She probably thought, yeah, who knows? That was a good story, though. That's definitely affirming especially for people like us. It's definitely really affirming.
Yeah. We spend all this time giving reasons why we believe and everything.
Yeah.
And when you have a personal experience like this, it really it's a great reason.
Yeah.
And by the way, the healer was standing right in front of me, and my son-in-law was standing right beside me, and he swears nobody blew in my ear. Now, if
it's probably him then.
You
think heaven's
He's always had a crush.
What's that?
Steve's always had. You couldn't hear me? All right, well, we're like 25 minutes past. So I'm glad you spent the time to say that whole story. I don't think it was too long at all. I think it's a really interesting part of it. Jordan, do you have any little thing you want to share at all? Obviously, you don't have to go on a big tirade.
Sure. Yeah, I got a short one. I just want to say thanks for you guys including me on this, and you and me both have really busy lives, and I'm not sure how busy Fumbles is from day to day, but I know that for me sometimes it's a struggle to make time to get in the Word, and so having a little bit of pressure to do that, it's been a good thing.
Absolutely, and we really appreciate you being here as well. And I can say after the first time we did this, I told my wife, I was like, I had more fun doing that than any podcast I can remember doing. Any little live session I've had talking about ducks. I was so pumped up after that first one. It felt so good. I felt close to God. It was great.
That was a good lesson.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do mine really, really quick because we're at 6:26.
This should be a shorter lesson anyway.
Yeah. But with
I
me,
hope.
I'm going to tie into yours a little bit, and it is the story about Georgie, and I don't really know what to think about it. And my intellectual mind always wants to make reasons for this or that or what could have happened. But I know for a long time that I've been praying to God that I would experience more spiritual side of things. I've been wanting to migrate over to the more spiritual side a little bit because I have always been plagued with so many doubts, and I spent so many years just either running from those doubts or running at the doubts. From about 19 to 35, I'd say I was running away from the doubts. And then about the time that I experienced my second divorce, and my life was tail spinning out of control, then I got back with God, and I spent the next, I'd say I spent about 5 years running at the doubts, where I just attacked them. And if I was worried about something like well, Christianity might not be true because of this, instead of running away from it in fear, I ran right at it. And one by one, God was like, well, we got that one, we got that one, we got that one. I mean, I was watching debates between atheists and Christians, and I was like, did the resurrection really happen historically? Can we prove that? Can we prove that the Bible actually, what the word we have now is the same as what they wrote back then? Just all sorts of stuff. I was running at it. And I came out of that really happy and really pleased with my findings. Like, okay, I can believe this, but it was also intellectually based that I was lacking. So I've been praying for quite a while about, God, I need some more closeness, some like spiritual, emotional closeness with you. And I've been asking him for something. And so I'm going to give you the short facts of what took place. I did something really stupid, and it ended up with my little black lab puppy Georgie getting hurt. She was hurt so bad that she couldn't walk on her leg without screaming and screaming. Got in the car, drove 12 minutes from point A to point B. During that time, I called my mom, and she was just, can't think of the word, fervently, a lot. She was praying a lot, fervently,
yeah,
about healing this little
We
dog.
got help from outside.
And and at the time, I was calling the vet. I was making an appointment, and I was just like beyond despair because I did something dumb, and I thought I'd broken this little dog's leg and maybe ended her hunting career forever. And so she prayed for it. I made the appointment with the vet. We got home. I put her on the concrete, and she could walk. And she wasn't screaming. Now, she limped a little bit. Over the next 2 hours, her limp was completely gone, and she was her normal self. You cannot see a single hint of it right now. I have problems saying she was healed. I have problems saying that. Because that side of me is just like, really? How I find myself saying it is, what I know is that she couldn't walk and she was screaming in pain. Mom prayed with her more fervently than any time I've ever seen. We got home and she could walk. That happened. That is the facts of the case. Over the next hour, 2 hours, her limp completely went away, and now she's 100% the same as she was. So I am calling it. I'm going to say she was healed because if I'm asking God to show me the spiritual thing and something like that happens, for me to be like, well, it probably still wasn't healing. To me, that's just like a slap in God's face. We're going to give God the glory of everything. And I'm going to give him the glory of that. Yeah. And I'm going to say, as far as I'm concerned, he stepped into my life and bailed me out from being a complete moron. And
well, you're still a moron.
But he bailed me out from it. So, that's where I'm going with that.
Well, the thing I like to say is that whether it was a supernatural act from God or whether it turned out right, I don't have to know that. I don't have to know.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be miraculous, breaking the laws of nature. I don't even know all the laws of nature to begin with. And so when God blesses me or saves me from something stupid that I did, I'm just thankful for it. It doesn't have to be a miracle.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to believe that it is.
Yeah.
Because I was praying for some signs and And for God to show up in my life, now that could have gone one or two ways. I could have gone and she could have a broken leg, and I could have ruined a dog by my stupidity and looked like a moron to thousands of people on YouTube. Or she could be fine today. It could have gone two routes.
Well,
I thought her leg was broken.
Yeah.
I really thought her leg was broken.
God has lots of ways of doing His will,
So
and we shouldn't
Yeah.
start splitting hairs all the time. Can He do something outside the laws of nature? Of course.
yeah, and I believe he does.
Yeah.
I don't think it happens so much. So I think it's like the chance of it happening
Yeah.
is relatively small, and maybe I shouldn't think that way. But
I don't know.
so many times when healings in the Bible happened, it talks about they believed because they believed because they believed, or because their faith, because their faith. It's like most of, or so many of the miracles that happened in the Gospels, it ends up with because of their faith, because they believe. And it's like, well, maybe I haven't seen miracles because of my lack of faith.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because of my skepticism. Maybe, I mean, that could very well be.
Well, I could get into a discussion on that.
Yeah, well, we better get going. We're already at 6:32, so we apologize for going 32 minutes on that, but that's just where it went. So hopefully there was some value in
He
that.
wanted to ask me what had happened this week. Well,
Yeah. All right.
So-
Well, let's roll right into it. I think we can knock that out in 15, 20 minutes. If it's not that short, that would be just
I think
fine.
we can. Yeah.
So do you want to do a real quick recap of, let me do it?
Yeah.
Okay. So real quick recap of the book of Acts, session 1. We've got Jesus preaching for about 40 days after his resurrection to a lot of different people. And he ascended into heaven. Before he did that, he said that to a select group of people, go to Jerusalem,
Yeah.
because you're going to receive something, or receive a gift. Did he say the Holy Spirit?
Yeah.
Okay, he said you're going to receive the Holy Spirit. He did? He said
Yeah.
the Holy Spirit? I thought okay.
Yeah.
So then they went to Jerusalem. They waited, and they had this event where they described it as fire on above everyone's head, licks of fire, and there was definitely volume to it because other people heard it.
Yeah.
Take that as
Yeah. Well, the wind blew like crazy.
yeah. So, and they received the Holy Spirit, and at that time they could speak in different languages. It was the day of Pentecost. On the day of Pentecost, it was when all of the people who believed in Judaism, Jews, practicing Jews,
Yeah.
came back to Jerusalem to celebrate. So now this select group, basically the apostles, went out into the crowds, and they could speak all different types of languages, which was called tongues. And at that day, 3,000 people were converted and saved. So we went from probably just 100, 200, 300, maybe 400 believers to 3,000 just bam on that on the day of Pentecost.
Bingo.
After that, they were preaching, and then we had an issue where a man named Stephen was stoned to death for what he was professing and believing. Saul, who later was Paul, was in on that event and watching it and holding people's coats while they were stoning Stephen to death. And after that, all of the Christians were so scared, they all just scattered.
Right.
After that, Paul went out and he was on fire to just persecute and kill Christians. So he's heading to Damascus, and he has interaction with Jesus, and he saw a light. He didn't actually see a body, right?
Yeah, I think it was a lie. Yeah.
Okay.
And I heard a voice.
And the voice was like, why are you persecuting me? Why are you persecuting me? And Paul just wanted to serve God. And so when that happened, and he was actually the last person, if I'm not mistaken, that was appeared to by Jesus Christ, right? The last one.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
so. And so he had a conversion, just bam. And he went blind for a while. A man healed him. And there we went into Peter and
He started preaching in Damascus. Then when they tried to kill him there right off, I mean, the tables turned. They let him, the believers let him out over the wall in a basket, and Paul went to Jerusalem to try to get in with the apostles, and they sort of rejected him because they were scared of him.
And during that next section, basically, God taught everyone that this is not just for Jews. This is for Jews and Gentiles. And
Right.
a Gentile is anyone who's not a Jew. So we're Gentiles. And convinced everyone that this message is not just for Jews. It's for everyone. And we're going to teach everyone the gospel of God. I think that's where we ended up.
Yeah. But there was a lot of stuff that had to happen to really make this work. They had a lot of these believers that scattered all over the place. went to Antioch, which is in Syria, and they formed a church there. And there were lots, this was not mainly a Jewish church. There were lots of Gentiles because there were Christians that had been scattered that came via like from Crete or some places, and they didn't have this thing against preaching to the Gentiles. So they just started preaching to them, and there were believers all over the place. And in the meantime, Peter had his vision and had gone and preached to the Roman centurion, and his whole household was saved. And so things are moving along the line here, and the church is beginning to understand that this is for the Samaritans, it's for the Gentiles, it's for Jews, it's for everybody. And so somewhere along the line, they had people in the church at Antioch that heard from God specifically about Paul. And right now, his traveling companion was Barnabas. And it was clear that after being in the church there for about a year and teaching and everything, that they were meant to go out away from Antioch and spread the news among towns and villages that had not heard the word. And so along that line, Paul and Barnabas, they took one trip, and then they had a disagreement on the second and third trip. So Paul brought in some other people to travel with him. So he had several different traveling companions. But the point is that he went 3 different trips up to Syria, up to what is now Turkey. We called it Asia Minor. And you want to put that map on?
Yep.
Okay, so these different colored lines show various trips that he took. Whoops.
I just want to make sure it's locked.
Okay. And so at the very bottom is Jerusalem.
And the section we were looking at last week is just that far right. So the map we looked at last week was just Gaza,
just
Jerusalem.
the far right, yeah.
Okay, so now we're...
And Antioch here is sort of along the right margin up toward the top. And you see Antioch there. And so they traveled, they went to Cyprus, and then they went up into what's marked as Asia there. And
what Mennonite countries would those be in Asia?
Well, that's like Turkey.
Okay.
And so then they came back, and by now there were enough enough believers, Gentile believers, that the issue really was coming to a head. What does a Christian, and by now they were being called that, what does a Christian have to do to be Christian? Does he have to?
Something the map?
No, that's okay. What do they have to do to be a Christian? Do they have to become a Jew first? And do they have to be circumcised? That was the big question, because God had given the Jews the symbol of their covenant with him by circumcision. And so now you have all these uncircumcised adults becoming Christians. So what's the issue there? And so when Paul came back off of that first journey, he went to Jerusalem, and they had a big council with Peter and Paul and the brother of Jesus, James, and various apostles. We're not sure who all was there, but certainly all the officials in Jerusalem were there. And they came to the conclusion that Gentile converts did not have to be circumcised. They didn't have to follow all the various Jewish festivals and holy days. And so they were given several requests of things to do. There was also an issue of...
So it basically just became, look, they don't have to do A through Z.
No.
You just have to believe in Jesus and follow him and have a relationship with him, which makes sense to all of us.
Believe in Jesus, and the expectation is that you'll be baptized. And so they came to that conclusion. Well, that was a major turning point, because at that point, if they require adult circumcision among all adult believers, you can imagine that might cut down on the number of believers that you
Yeah.
have.
And what a silly thing to expect someone in order, like, if you're not circumcised, you're not going to heaven.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, they made the first trip started in AD 48, and the second trip started in AD 49 and went through 52.
So 15 to 18 years after the death of Jesus.
Yeah, that's when this starts. So it took about 15 years just to get the Jewish believers to fully understand and the church accept. And in fact, there were some that didn't. And in some of Paul's letters, we find that there were Jews traveling around to various Gentile churches trying to convince them of the fact that they needed to be Jews. And Paul wrote against those and everything. And it was the ruling of the church, but some people had a hard time getting it through their heads. And so they made 3 trips. The third trip was AD 53 to 57. And then and then from that time, 57 to 68, Paul had come back to Jerusalem, was arrested, had several trials in Judea, and then he was taken to Rome, and he went through shipwreck and everything getting to Rome, and he was under house arrest until about AD 68, in which he was tried and killed. And so that's sort of the overall timing of this. Paul's, let's see if I'm missing anything here. I guess not. Paul's standard operation, he understood this message was going to the Gentiles, but it was to the Jews first, which by and large rejected Jesus. But he would always go into the Jewish synagogue and begin to teach in the Jewish synagogue and see if there were any people there that would believe. And there were usually some that did believe, more in some places than others. And then when some of them would get jealous of him and mad at him and harden their hearts against his message, decide he's wrong, and they'd throw him out. And he'd go out into the marketplace or sometimes lecture halls, and he would teach about Jesus. And during this time, during this formation of the church, it was important initiation time for it to really embed itself and for people to believe. And when God takes a church through these kinds of times, and like coming out of Egypt for the Jewish people, he did a lot of miracles. And so there were lots and lots of miracles being done. And mostly it was being done by the apostles. And so Paul was one of those that was healing people. And so just to kind of give you a feel for what was happening at these churches, I've chosen a couple of churches to discuss. And the first one was Paul at Thessalonica. As I say, Paul was traveling up through what is present-day Turkey. He was crossing the Aegean Sea and going. In fact, at one point, God spoke to him in a dream and said, "Don't go east, go west." So he went across into Greece, came all the way down Greece to the bottom, which is where Corinth is, to the Mediterranean Sea. And then he would circle back around. And so that was his movements. So Elliot, would you like to read the first 10 verses? And this is Paul at Thessalonica. Yeah, that's it.
Now, when they had traveled through Amphipolis and
Don't worry about pronunciation.
and another place, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And according to Paul's custom, he went to them and for 3 Sabbaths reasoned with them from scriptures, explaining and giving evidence that the Christ had to suffer and rise again from the dead, and saying, "This Jesus who I am proclaiming to you is the Christ." And some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, along with a large number of God-fearing Greeks and a number of leading women. But the Jews, becoming jealous and taking along some wicked men from the marketplace, formed a mob and set the city in an uproar. And attacking the house of Jason, they were seeking to bring them out to the people. Where they did not find them, they began dragging Jason and some brethren before the city authorities, shouting, "These men who have upset the world have come here also." And Jason has welcomed them, and they all act contrary to the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, Jesus. They stirred up the crowd and the city authorities who heard these things, and when they had received a pledge from Jason and the others, they released them.
Okay, so you could just take that story and just say that happened at practically every town they went into. That is just a model of their reception. And so yeah, but it's don't worry. And so the other example that I chose is Ephesus, which is also in Turkey. And they went into Ephesus, and there was a big church that got started there. In fact, Paul taught in the synagogue for 3 months until he got kicked out, and then he moved to the school of Tyrannus, which must have been a lecture hall. And they taught in that lecture hall for 2 years. And there was a big temple in Ephesus, and there was a goddess that they had idols of called Artemis. And these guys that worked silver were making a lot of money making these images and selling them to people. And so when Paul was just doing lots and lots of healing, and everybody was hearing about it, and there were a lot of people turning away from Artemis, and this was cutting into the business. So the silversmiths got this big mob going, and they got so aggressive that they began to fear that the Romans were going to come in with their military force and put them down. So they got kind of cooled down. And in this case, Paul was actually able to stay for 2 years. And so that's just a note to finish up. Paul was greatly persecuted. He was beaten, he was whipped, he was stoned and left for dead. He just had all kinds of stuff happening to him all the time, because every time when they rejected him, they would try to beat him or kill him or whatever. In fact, in 2 Corinthians 6, 4, and 5, it says regarding himself, "But in everything, commending ourselves as servants of God, in much endurance, in afflictions, in hardships, in distress, in beatings, in imprisonments, in tumults, in labors, in sleeplessness, in hunger." So these believers, Paul went through all of that. And these believers, early first century believers, went through it. And in fact, they were persecuted and killed and had to fight in the Colosseum even up to about the year 400 AD. So but this didn't stop the church from growing. They were really committed to their beliefs in Jesus, and the miracles that God had done during that first century really established the church. And so at the end of this time, Paul had decided that he would. There was a famine in Jerusalem, and he'd been talking to the various churches saying, "You ought to give some offering to the church of Jerusalem." And so he was committed, in fact, was convinced by God that this was something that he should do, that he should take the offering and the money that he had collected and take it to Jerusalem. And along the way, practically every town he stopped at, there would be a prophet in that church that would say, "Paul, if you go down there," this is not a command for him not to go. It was just a warning of what would happen, that you will be arrested and you endure afflictions and everything. And sure enough, we find out that that's what happened. And so our next lesson is the last about 10 years of Paul's life after his arrest. So that kind of tops it off for tonight.
Great. Well, we're going to wrap it up with a prayer here in a second, but I would just remind you to share this on Facebook or just talk with your friends and see if it's something they might like. We appreciate everyone coming out with us today. Next Thursday is number 4. So we would love to have you guys back there for that. So let's go ahead and pray real quick. Thank you so much for this platform where we're able to share stories from the Bible and things that you would have us to teach. And we just ask that you allow all of us to expand in you, whether it's a more spiritual side or more of an intellectual side or whatever it is that we're just believing and understanding and being with you this week, Lord.
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, fdhfaith@gmail.com, or you can also put them in the comments to this video. We would love and be very happy to talk with any of you. If you're having any doubts or you just want to open up to someone and talk about what's going on in your life, you can also get me at freelanceduckhunting@gmail.com. He's monitoring the fdhfaith@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out to us because we are readily available to talk with you one-on-one if need be about what's going on in your life. So anything else you want to say?
That's about it.
Jordan?
That's about it.
All right. Take care, guys. We're going to sign off now.